Greetings. In this series, we are going to look at mathematics from around the world. Math is a subject that is studied around the world by various peoples and has involvement in culture at various levels. We have images used as artwork from geometry, and we have geometries that were studied because someone was looking for one thing, discovered another, and then that was applied to something else. In this series, we want to look at mathematics from around the world and the various things that connect us as a people in a beautiful creation. I hope you enjoy worldwide mathematics. Greetings. Hopefully you are finding some mathematics to enjoy in your part of the world. This is episode 4 of our Worldwide Mathematics series, and this time we are stopping in China. And I would like to focus on a mathematician who basically revolutionized differential geometry. This is the mathematician Shiing-Shen Chern. And I feel he's kind of in the same line as Alexander Grothendieck, who kind of revolutionized algebraic geometry. Instead of proving a theorem or providing an example from a theorem statement this time, I would like to present more of a biography. In the background, you can see here a portion of one of Chern's theorems, and this has connections with Finsler geometry. Chern's work crossed over boundaries between various areas that could be labeled as different geometries. I've mentioned differential geometry. You can mention work in Riemannian geometry, Finsler geometry. I took a lot of the biographical information from one particular paper with some other ideas added in. I first came to learn about Chern through a video, and I'm not sure if it's the video that was presented at the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute or not. I had originally watched it on a streaming channel, and I've not been able to find that video again, so it may no longer be available through that avenue. The Mathematical Sciences Research Institute at one time had shown a video taking the long view, the life of S.S. Chern, which was put together by George Sixery. And I don't know if that's the same video that I had seen or not, but that video that I had seen was my first exposure to Chern's story. Professor Dr. Chern was born the 28th of October, 1911 in Beijing, China. His early arithmetic education was given to him by his father, who was a lawyer and would work with him. Following the education in arithmetic that he received from his father, he was self-taught using the 3-volume Bichon Mathematics. When he went to middle school, he found mathematics easy and also found that he enjoyed reading and writing. At 15, he passed the college entrance exam and entered as a student into Nankai University to study mathematics. At this period in time, there were few mathematicians with PhDs in China, and Chern was fortunate enough to have a teacher there who had his PhD in mathematics. This was the late 20s, Going into the early 30s, there were mathematicians returning to China who had PhDs. When it got time for Chern to be able to be students of those mathematicians, he found that the professors essentially weren't challenging the students to be creative in their own right, but merely working on some of the same ideas that their professors had done. And so Chern just didn't feel like there was a depth of development with those professors. Chern found that graduates of Quinhua grad school could get assistance, and so that was his goal. He went to that graduate school and he was successful there. The professors at this school focused on projective differential geometry. He was awarded a 2-year fellowship. He had the option to go to the United States, but chose instead to request special permission to go to Germany. He wanted to study in Hamburg because he wanted to be able to study with a mathematician that he had begun to take interest in, first through his textbook and further being able to see him speak in person. And Chern was able to attend that lecture series. And so he was granted that special permission. This is a time period in Germany where pre-World War II hostilities were taking shape. Jewish professors were being expelled from universities. The good thing at this time was Hamburg was not touched as much at this point by those hostilities as some of other Germany. And so Professor Chern was able to go to this university and to be able to study under Professor Blaschke. And this professor was not always present, and so Chern also worked with his assistant. While working at Hamburg, they studied Cartan's differential geometry. Cartan was in France. Chern was offered some jobs after completing his studies in Germany and receiving his Doctor of Science. He instead chose to go to Paris to study mathematics with Cartan. As he completed his studies with Cartan in France, this was the time where war was again affecting China, this time with the Sino-Japanese War, and these hostilities caused problems with the universities, as wars do tend to do. So originally, Chern was going to work for one university. Some universities were kind of connected together to form the Southwest Associated University, and so Chern worked for them and kind of worked for 2 universities essentially in this connected piece. During this time period also, Chern was able to get married. In July of 1939, Professor Chern married Shiing-Shen, and they eventually had a son and a daughter. Chern believes that his wife should get credit as much as him for his work in mathematics because she took care of the family and she helped keep things going, and he seemed to be really connected with his wife, and that's such a wonderful thing to see. They ended up being separated for about 6 years due to the war issues. In 1943, Veblen was able to obtain membership for Professor Chern at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton, and Chern was able to go to that, but had to get passage on a military transport to do that. He found this 2-year period of time to be very productive. It was during this time that he found the intrinsic proof for the Gauss-Bonnet theorem, which has been a really important discovery for him. This theorem had already been proven, but the proof that Chern found was more intrinsic and also was generalizable, and so could take the theorem beyond the limitation that it previously had. This is a nice description of the Gauss-Bonnet theorem that was in one of the articles that I looked at when I was researching the biography of Professor Chern. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea of what's involved in this. Also, he came up with the Chern characteristic classes. He returned to China and became a committee member for the new Institute of Mathematics Academia Sinica. Civil War eventually began to break out in China, so Chern and his family again had to deal with an aspect of war in their life. But fortunately, there was another invitation offered to him to come to the United States, and so he moved the family to the United States. This time the invitation to the United States came from J. Robert Oppenheimer, and Chern went to work for the University of Chicago, and then later University of California at Berkeley. While he was at Berkeley, in 1981, he became the founding director for the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute there. And then a few years later, he returned to China to also help establish the Nankai Mathematical Research Institute. It was the 3rd of December 2004 that Professor Dr. Chern died in Tianjin, China. There was discussion on whether he should be draped with the flag of the People's Republic of China or with a communist flag. His daughter stepped in and suggested that they use a plain white flag, since Professor Chern was not a political figure, and that was the option that took place. At one point when Chern had visited China, he was surrounded by people wanting autographs and having the fan appearance that one might expect for someone possibly of rock star or movie star status. A wonderful situation to see for an educator who enjoyed helping students. Differential geometry is normally one of those classes that happen towards the upper levels, or the beginning of the upper levels of mathematics in university studies. So you might see this toward the end of a bachelor's degree, or possibly in the beginning stages of graduate work. So there are some things that are involved in the workup to get to this place. This is differential geometry, so there's an aspect of calculus involved in this. There are some topological ideas that are involved in this. So there's a lot that goes into this. Some of the topics that Chern dealt with, the people that he studied, like Cartan, are seen as difficult topics to deal with, and Chern was able to work with these things and bring forth new ideas. This really says something about Chern's ability to handle this knowledge and discovery. it was also fortunate for him to be able to work with some of these mathematicians firsthand. The beginning of a theorem statement from the book Lectures on Differential Geometry. This is a book in a series on university mathematics that is published by World Scientific. This particular volume that I have here has a paper in it that I believe was only formerly available in Chinese. It's translated in this edition into English. So that's the numerical indicator here corresponds to its placement in this particular textbook. So there's a lot involved in just trying to decode a theorem statement such as this. Hopefully this has been interesting to listen to, this short biography of an important and interesting mathematician. If you look at the resources here, you can see some further information about Dr. Chern's life and possibly some of the things that he studied from a mathematical perspective. There's also a link in there where you can read a little bit about Grothendieck if you are interested in getting a little bit of biographical background on this mathematician as well. Cheerful calculations.